everyone. Happy Thursday. Happy December 15th. We're halfway through December and we are almost done with this course. Get in the comments. Please tell me who you are, who you're with, where you're calling from, and whether you've been following this course since the beginning. So what we're doing today, if you're new to this series, even though we're at the very end, this is not a course we build on previous ideas. Every single episode, we learn something different about the world of wine, and we drink Texas wine along with it. Today, it is the Grower Project, The Source Sangiovese. I'm sorry, my light is so bright you can't see. And it is the 2020 vintage. So if you're joining with this wine, open it up. If you're joining with another wine, open that up and start drinking. This is the third to last course for the fall semester wine school that's hosted by William Chris Wine Company. And I am Kelsey. I am the Director of Education with William Chris Wine Company. All right, let's see who's watching today. Steve, you are the first one in the comments. It's lovely to see you in here again. Reed, hi. Nice to see you on here. Michelle, welcome. I hope Ray's there as well. Sherry, hello. Oh, that Leahy Mourvedre, Steve, is wonderful, isn't it? If you've had it before. Kirsten, good to see you again. Catherine in San Antonio, hello. Julie and John from Houston. I'm so happy to see people from all across Texas. I mean, that's the purpose of virtual tastings, isn't it? It's to connect people who aren't necessarily all together, but we've had a nice far reach with this series. I think we've even had some people in Colorado and Michigan the other day. And then who was it that went to Bordeaux or something like that and joined virtually at like 1 a.m. That was awesome. John, good to see you. Tracy, hi. Awesome. Donna, if I missed anybody, Rachel, hi. If I missed anybody, hello. I'm glad y'all are all here. Just a reminder, as you can see, I can see the comments on Facebook and on YouTube. So feel free to ask any questions that you have because I am more than happy to answer them. I am so excited to drink this wine. It is one of my very favorites. And full disclosure, this wine is part of a small series that is produced by Grower Project. They make about 4 different wines every year. They're all single variety wines. They're typically single vineyard wines from stellar vineyards that are not making any wine for themselves. So the Grower Project is dedicated to connecting small growers to a larger market. And that's the purpose of this brand. You can find the wines in some wholesalers. Trader Joe's is where I get mine. Broke my cork. And this wine is $20 to $30, depending on where you're buying it from. And the quality for the price is just outstanding. I love to buy myself cases of this at a time because it will be my wine for every night of the week. And it's on my holiday tables. It's wonderful with food. I can't talk this wine up enough. And if you have it at home with you, you will see exactly why. All right. And I can smell it from out here. When I'm holding it here, I could already smell it kind of puffing up. I know that I like this wine decanted. So if you'd like, put some in a decanter, put some in a glass, and then pour it into another glass. We talked about decanting before. It's just getting oxygen in contact with the wine, which you can accomplish with swirling as well. But I'm going to use my little 1 glass decanter here to pop some of those extra spice notes out of this wine, boost up the texture of the wine, which I think this wine can really, really benefit from. So this is 75% Sangiovese and 25% Petite Syrah. And it's all coming from a single vineyard in Burnett County, which is in the Texas Hill Country. That property is called Uplift Vineyard, and it is owned by William Chris Wine Company, which Grower Project is a part of. Awesome. Let's smell. I always get a sawdusty character off of these. So Petite Syrah is usually a really, really powerful, juicy grape. but Texas Petite Syrah can have real elegance to it. The grapes get really ripe, but when we're pulling this from the soil at Uplift Vineyard, which is really, really rocky sand and has a lot of mineral content in it, we get such an elegant Petite Syrah from it. And the Sangiovese is super dried herb spice driven. And then we have a lovely balance of fruit from both the Sangiovese and the Petite Syrah. So I hope you're tasting this with me. Just a reminder, I'll pop it up here. This is what we're drinking today. So today, let's see. Last week, what did we talk about? We talked about, remind me what we talked about, guys. I don't remember. Today, we are talking about sustainability. Oh gosh, what was it that we talked about last week? We talked about something that I was really excited to talk about too. Someone will get in there and remind me. So today's topic, I'm also equally excited about. The last 4 weeks of this course, I picked the topics that I'm most eager to speak with you guys about. Sustainability is a hot topic in Texas right now. And this is kind of a trend that we're seeing around all of the US, is words popping up like organic, biodynamic, natural, and sustainable. So today we're talking about the sustainable portion of Texas, but I do want to give y'all some background on each of those topics, just so that you all know how to tell the difference between each of those in a conversation about what sustainable actually is. I know someone, the challenges of growing wine in Texas, that was last week's discussion. Frost, hail, the difficulty of talking about Mourvedre and selling it to someone who's never heard of the grape Mourvedre. We talked about the challenges of growing wine in Texas. Thanks, guys, very much. I trust y'all to lead this class just as much as I do. All right, so let's break down what the differences in each of these are as we sip on this wine, which is a sustainable wine. So first of all, organic. Organic is a huge trend right now. We hear this word thrown around. Organic means food produced in a way that supports the biodiversity of the land, using entirely natural methods. So the goal is to maintain soil health. It's to maintain the biodiversity of the area. It's to sustain the land around it so that it can all have health. This is for agriculture, and it's for the final food product as well. So organic can mean many things because there are several people that certify for organics, and each certification has a little bit of a different meaning. But essentially, what an organic vineyard or producer of any type of organic product will do is to minimize or eliminate the use of synthetic chemicals in order to grow their product. You'll see many terms on labels, including 100% organic or just organic or made with organic grapes. Each of these defines the different levels of organic product that goes into the actual bottle. So for instance, you can make wine with organic yeast. You can make wine with organic grapes, but use non-organic yeast or other things that go into the bottle. You can make wine with organic grapes, but also use sulfites in the process to preserve the wine. But a completely organic wine will minimize and even restrict to low amounts any use of sulfites to preserve the wine inside the bottle. So to be clear, William Chris Wine Company is not an organic producer. Organics in Texas is extremely difficult because of the humidity here, the disease pressure that comes along with growing grapes in Texas. That being said, there are many ways to be organic without being certified organic. There are ways to still cut out the use of synthetic chemicals while also doing what's needed for the land around you. So we'll talk more about that. But essentially, that is what organic means. And we do have some organic producers of grapes within the state of Texas, which is an incredible thing. All right. Kirsten, yes. Sorry, I'm looking at the comments real quick. I did say you can get this wine at Trader Joe's. I don't believe it's necessarily at all Trader Joe's, but the Trader Joe's that choose to carry it are amazing. All right, so let's jump into what biodynamics means. So biodynamics is agriculture that's made with a focus on the holistic environment. So this includes similar things to organics, such as soil health and maintaining the biodiversity of the land. And certainly biodynamics does incorporate organic methods because the purpose of it is to allow the land to enrich itself. There is use of no chemicals. It is a natural way of allowing the land to sustain itself. So any things that are added to the soil or fed to the animals on the property are completely natural. In addition to that, everything is based on a cycle of the year. And this goes along with the moon and the solar cycles. So they go as far as to insist that pruning of the grapevines is done on certain days where it is most beneficial to the plant and that allows the plant to react naturally to the pruning process. And it's all to do with where the energy is in the grapevine at certain times. If you're looking at a grapevine has energy in it. It's producing sugars, it's using carbohydrates, it is taking in carbon dioxide, it is moving water throughout its trunk out to the leaves, through to the root systems, it's pulling in things from the root systems. All of this is energy flowing throughout the grapevine. And this energy is even passed along to other plants that are sharing the root system beneath the ground. So everything that is day versus night, or the cycles of the moon, the transfer of wind, air, fire, and water, all of that gives us a pattern with which to use to harvest the grapes, prune them, and treat them differently based on where the energy is in the grape vine at the time. So all of this calendar, this idea, this scientific approach married with a really kind of spirit of nature approach was started by Dr. Rudolf Steiner around 1920s. And this is when, in the late 1920s, is when the Demeter biodynamic certification was created. So that is the most known, most common biodynamic certification that you can get. And it essentially tells a consumer, if you see a Demeter certification on a label, it tells a consumer that the grapevines are grown in a place that is also supporting other crops, which is required by Demeter. It's also supporting some form of animal, and all of these different crops and animals are benefiting from each other. They are supporting the growth of each other. The majority of the seeds that are used are produced from that ecosystem that is living within that producer's land. So this includes things like planting cover crops in order to benefit the soil, which will then benefit a different crop that's planted next to the grapevines, et cetera, et cetera. This can include things like wildflowers. And then in addition, animals are used to support the health of the crops as well. This includes composting. And then there are, maybe they're not rituals. I call them rituals. There are ritualistic things that are planted in the soil in order to enrich it. You have to plant it in the soil at certain times when the moon is full and et cetera, et cetera. There's an extent to which I can't talk anymore about biodynamics because I've never worked at a biodynamic place. But the goal is a holistic environment that supports itself. So this is organics plus this spirit of nature system. We do work with a biodynamic farmer. Rock Clay Vineyard is a biodynamic farm. We also pull some biodynamic practices. Some of this is like harvesting at night. The grapevines have energy stored in certain places at nighttime. When we harvest at that time, it is more beneficial to the grapevine. We're also in the process of planting a cover crop, radishes and things at High Estate at William Chris Vineyards. And this cover crop is going to benefit our soil and in turn benefit the grapevines that are growing there. We've decided to plant cover crops that pull nitrogen from the ground and consume nitrogen because our soil is very heavy in nitrogen from the turkeys that lived on site 100 years before us. So in this way, we're practicing holistic choices without being fully biodynamic. If you have any questions, post them in the comments, and I'm going to hop on to natural wine next. Let's see if I have any questions. Hi, Mark Manley. How are you? Julie, that's a good question. Julie asked if there has to be a buffer between organic and adjacent areas. And to the extent of what I know, no, there does not. And in fact, organic practices, in order to be fully organic, you have to have a period of 3 years where the soil has not been sprayed with any synthetic chemical or anything that is not permitted by whatever certification the vineyard is getting. So even though a soil may have been heavily treated with something in the past, as long as there is 3 years between when the grapevines or whatever product is growing, as long as the synthetic chemicals have not been used for 3 years, you can be a certified organic vineyard. But yes, that leaves the question of what if the vineyard next door is not practicing organics? What if some of their chemicals are making their way over to the edge of your land or whatever? I assume that is looked at in the process of getting the certification because it is quite rigorous. But I do know some vineyards that are right next to each other, one of which is organic and others that are not and are right next door. A great place to read more about this is Oregon. Oregon has some really interesting systems that require that there is space in between systems. They even go as far as to have a program that cleanses waterways because they recognize that these rivers and streams that run through land and eventually cut out into the ocean, they track a lot of land. They track through a lot of agricultural land where people can be spraying whatever they want to. But Oregon has some great protection around streams and rivers such as that. Rachel, this is your first time learning about the past turkeys. Oh, then we're gonna take a little story time here then. Okay, so High Estate is in High, Texas. This is the location of the William Chris Vineyards tasting room. So the family that owned the land before us was the Dykey family. It was a family of, I think, 12, maybe 14. And what they did is they owned turkeys. They had hundreds of turkeys on the land, and the turkeys did what they do, and they fertilized the soil, and it became extremely nitrogen rich. This is our version of terroir. Our soil is like none other. Unless you've had hundreds of turkeys on land and are planting grapevines, you don't have soil that is like ours. So we've planted grape varieties that can handle a little bit more nitrogen. This means that there is extra consideration in the rootstock that we graft our vines onto. They really need to be able to handle a good amount of nitrogen, but we are starting to plant radishes. Lane, I don't know. Oh, where are the radishes planted? Yeah, so there are rows between each vine, and Lane asked where the radishes are planted. So in between each vine, there's walk space. The radishes and other cover crop are being planted in between each row. So they're growing right next to each other. John says, for organics, I believe there is more space between rows of vines based on how you harvest. Yes, and it depends on who is certifying you as organic. But yes, that can be a factor. Awesome. Okay, so let's go on to natural wine. Natural wine is a little bit different than both organic and biodynamic because it is not legally defined. So there is a spectrum of what natural actually means. You know what? I need to take a sip of wine. I tend to forget to drink wine during this, which is the whole point. Smell what sustainable wine smells like. Gosh, I love this wine, and more is coming out of it as I sip it. But it has just such a wonderful texture and richness to it. Awesome. Let me see if there was anything I missed about biodynamics. The goal of living soil is huge. It's all about nurturing the soil. And this includes with crop rotation, so making sure that the soil is used in different ways by different crops. Yeah, okay, so natural wine, not legally defined. Natural wine can mean a lot of different things, but generally it's associated with minimal intervention. And this includes both in the grape growing process and in the winemaking process. So you'll often find a wine that has been grown in an organic method. A natural wine would not use synthetic chemicals. It would have some sort of goal centered around making sure that the grapes grow in a holistic environment as well. Even though it may not be certified organic, this is generally how natural grapes are grown. And then in the winemaking, you may not fine or filter the wine. You will not add yeast to the process of winemaking. You'll use native yeast. This means there's some unpredictability in the winemaking process because native yeast can be very unpredictable in terms of flavor and in terms of how they act and actually ferment the wine. A natural wine sometimes can be filtered. I mean, it's with a natural wine, you don't always know what you're going to get, but there's some form of minimal intervention applied to the process. And just to translate that to what the Grower Project does, we find and filter the wines, but not to an extent that it would remove what I call the soul of the wine. And this is the same at William Chris and Lost Straw Cellars, Skeleton Key. We're not filtering the wine to the point that it removes the personality from it. Over fining and filtering a wine can damage it. We are not adding unnatural things to the wine. The goal of the Grower Project brand is to take a grape from a specific site that it's grown and allow it to showcase itself in as true a way as possible without harming it or changing it along the way. And that is expressing the idea of terroir in the glass. So this Sangiovese Petite Syrah blend should taste and smell like nothing else anywhere else in the world because it came from Uplift Vineyard. And it's completely unique in that way. In addition, the year 2020 at Uplift Vineyard was very unique. So the wine is dedicated to showcasing a point in time, a snapshot of a specific grape blend from a specific vineyard. And the only way to do that is to use a minimal intervention approach. This is not a completely natural wine, but it uses so many natural minimal intervention methods to make this more of a natural product than you will typically find in the wine world. And so in that way, we're making this wine with a little bit pulled from organic methods and a little bit pulled from biodynamic methods and a little bit pulled from natural methods, and then 100% sustainable. So let's talk about what sustainable means. Sustainable is a system put in place. This is legally defined in some places. You can become a certified sustainable place. But ultimately, what sustainable means is it has a goal of protecting the environment, economic and social systems that all work together to create an industry, the wine industry. So a sustainable product will not only sustain the environment in a holistic way, as holistic a way as you choose to be, but it will also sustain some form of social or economic impact. Sustainability is often talked about in terms of conservation, especially with water conservation and recyclability. You know, specific product choices are considered in this as well. And on top of that, the social system is something that we talk about. So we're going to break this down a little bit deeper. I got to pull out some notes to make sure that I talk about this in the way that I planned. Okay. I got a couple comments, just checking to make sure I don't miss anything. Well, that's a good question, John. So John asks, who determines the William Chris winemaking approach in terms of minimal intervention? Was it Chris, Bill, Tony? These are all team members at William Chris. And I'll include in there Andrew Sides at Lost Straw and Brad Buckaloo, who's the winemaker and head of production at William Chris Wine Company as well. So the winemaking approach was decided early on by Chris and Bill because their goal, and Andrew Sides as well, in terms of Lost Straw and Grower Project, the goal was to have a 100% Texas product. And that in itself is a sustainable practice. Not having to transport grapes in from outside of Texas conserves many things, such as fossil fuels, gas, also time as well. Supporting the Texas grape growing industry supports the state of Texas, and Grower Project is all about sustaining the growers. Okay, so on top of that, the winemakers, Andrew Sides, Brad Buckaloo, Tony, Bill, and Chris all came in with the desire to have wines that express terroir. So this started with Chris, Bill, and the minimal intervention approach is something that was heavily influenced by Tony, because Tony's approach to minimal intervention may have looked different than before. And William Chris has made great strides forward in practicing more and more minimal intervention. So early on, the goal was a terroir-driven product using only Texas grapes. But the addition of Tony, Andrew Sides, and Brad Buckaloo has only reinforced that minimal intervention method. And that means inviting texture into the wine by not adding things to the wine or manipulating it in any way, but just by diversifying the vessels that we use, such as concrete. It's limiting the transfer of oxygen within the winemaking process. So making sure that the wine stays at cool temperatures instead of manipulating it so much. But you'll notice a theme across William Chris wines from early on is that the wines are often pretty hazy. And this is partially due to the limited fining and filtering of the wine. All right, I got a couple questions in here. I hope that answered your question. We need to talk more about that, John, when you come out to the vineyard next. John, that's a good question too. Due to the current environment with growing food, farming, etc., it would seem that everyone would be sustainable. Are there vineyards and wineries that aren't sustainable? Yes, and I haven't gotten into my sustainable discussion yet. So you will, I'll expand into that as we talk more about what practices we use to be sustainable. Mona, Uplift Vineyard is in Burnett County. It's north of High Texas, maybe, I don't know if it's a full 60 miles away. From where I am in Spring Branch, if you take 281 north for an hour and like 15 minutes, you'll hit Burnett. Mona, yes, I will touch on irrigation. All right. Okay. So let's talk a little bit deeper about sustainability and what it means. So there are a couple of ways to be sustainable. You can break it down into three major categories. The first is environmental sustainability. This is in the form of water conservation, the conservation of things like fossil fuels, waste management, irrigation, using cover crops, minimizing the use of synthetic chemicals or chemicals in any form, et cetera, et cetera. Then there is social, and this is a huge aspect of sustainability. There is social sustainability, and this is sustaining the people around you. And a couple ways that we practice sustainability is by not just serving wine, but by making wine an experience. We grow some of our own grapes, but we also support growers in the area of Texas by choosing not to use only grapes that we grow ourselves. We choose to source this wine from a place that needs support and needs access to a larger market. And in this way, we can support growers who don't make their own wine, who maybe only have 10 acres of vines, like Altaloma Vineyards. And in that way, we can give them access to, first of all, reliable, steady income, but also we can provide a system of mentorship with them. We've grown grapes for a long time. We can allow them to be more successful and reliable by giving them access to resources like education, support with things like hail netting. In Texas, that's very important. And we'll expand on that. And finally, before I move on to the third, social sustainability has a lot to do with the team that you work with. Providing access to things like health insurance is a huge part of social sustainability. And that, John, is a big area where not everyone is able to be sustainable. You can have a goal to provide health insurance, but creating a system where you're able to provide access to health insurance and additional benefits like holidays off or vacation time or, et cetera. There are so many benefits that not just in a winery, but also in hospitality. It's sometimes difficult to get access to resources like that. So you are practicing sustainability by supporting the people that you serve wine for and also the people who are working with you. And finally, thanks, Christopher. I see your note to drink wine. Economic. There is the third aspect of economic sustainability. And this is making sure that you have the resources to continue on without having to start over. This is investing in yourself so that you can then provide resources to your environment and to society. This is making sure that you can support the economy, the industry that you're working in. And we'll expand a little bit more on that. But first, let me read the comments because I've seen a lot of comments coming in, which is exciting. As we talk about sustainability, I expect a lot of questions or comments. Steve, yes, I pronounced Burnett correctly because if I didn't say it correctly, I would be well corrected by the people that I work with. We work with grapes from a lot of different places, and I have definitely been scolded for pronouncing things wrong. Like I used to say Gillespie County, which I understand is Gillespie County. Llano is a huge one. When I lived in Colorado, there was a taco place that I went to, and we would get the Llano taco. And coming here and saying Llano was a big no-no. Thanks, guys, for very supportive comments. Yes, sustainability is a big endeavor. And I'm going to tell y'all a lot of different ways in which we are sustainable. And it's something we're extremely proud of. But I think sustainability is something that's largely misunderstood. So I'm excited to talk about it. Yes, Lane, Parissos is nearby. So is Tornaloke. Tornaloke is another winery that's in that area. Not a lot else is out there. I think the closest grocery store is like an hour away. Awesome. Okay. So a couple different ways that we practice sustainability, just to give you a reference to exactly what we're doing. And first of all, sustainability isn't like a checklist. It is a consistent desire to reach towards more sustainable conservational actions. So this is a progress. We're consistently looking at what we do yearly, daily, even, and making choices that are better. So a couple of things that we do to sustain the environment are planting cover crop, minimizing our use of synthetic pesticides and herbicides, et cetera, wherever possible. Environmental sustainability also means irrigation, planting drip irrigation underground instead of irrigating in other methods. Drip irrigation is something that needs to be installed in a vineyard. So it takes forethought, it takes planning. But ultimately, drip irrigation is a way to make sure that we're using water in a thoughtful way that doesn't waste as much of it. The way that grapevines take in water, they can't take in just as much water as they want to at a time. And especially the soil that we work with in Texas, it drains water pretty quickly. So drip irrigation is a way to make sure that the grapes get just enough water to use, theoretically all of it without being overloaded with water and then letting some drain too deep in the soil to be accessible to the grapevines. In this way, we're able to cut down the amount of water that we use. And grapevines don't actually need that much water. So overusing water is something that can be extremely wasteful. Another way to practice water conservation is by using flood irrigation. And this is something that you can do, especially if you're on a slope. You melt water that's at the top of a mountain and you dig trenches in your vineyard to catch that water and slow it down so that it provides a natural access to water for your grapes instead of having to pull from things like an aquifer. This is something, if you're not pulling from an aquifer, you are then not just sustaining your vineyard, you're sustaining everyone else who needs water from these reserves. If you go to William Chris and High, you'll see a big tin structure next to the grapevines that you come in on your left just before you get to High Society, that big building with the windows. That's a rainwater catcher. We are catching rainwater in order to use it to go to our grapes that are right next door. And in the years where we get tons of rain, this is extremely, extremely beneficial because it allows us to use natural resources instead of reserves to sustain our larger environment. There are many other ways to practice environmental sustainability. These are just some of them. We could go on and on, but the last one that I'll talk about is the choice to use sustainable grape varieties. And this is where this wine comes to mind, because if you plant the wrong grape varieties in Texas that don't jive with and work with the environment that we're in, you're setting them up to fail. And ultimately, when a grape variety can't succeed in the place that you've planted it, you run additional cost for purchasing more grapes and the time it takes to plant those grapes. Worst case, you file bankruptcy, you're in debt. This is something that harms the entire industry and economy. It's a waste of land, a waste of time. So being able to plant grape varieties with the forethought that they will be able to stand the heat, that they don't need as much water as some other grape varieties, that they won't get sunburned so easily, that they have some sort of natural protection against the diseases that come along with growing grapes in Texas, such as Pierce's disease, phylloxera. These are very real things that don't have cures. And planting the right grape varieties means doing research, talking to people in the industry who know what those grape varieties are. And it's also decades and decades, hundreds of years actually, of planting the wrong grape varieties and learning from our mistakes. The better a vine can survive for the 30 to 60 years that a grapevine can live for, the less replanting that needs to happen, the less risky your choices are when making wine. It's not just the grapevine dying, it's the risk of early season frost. There are certain grape varieties that have a resistance to things like frost that is a big threat to Texas. And this is why we talked about the challenges of growing wine in Texas last week and are talking about sustainability today. All of those challenges that we talked about last week are considered when we talk about the grape varieties that we choose for Texas. So the grape varieties that we choose, like Sangiovese and like Petite Syrah, are hardy grape varieties that can succeed long-term in Texas soil. They thrive in the heat. Maybe they bud late in the season when the threat of spring frost has already passed. Maybe they thrive with less water than other grape varieties. Maybe they have thicker trunks with just more flexibility. There are many, many considerations that go into planting the right grape variety that we don't have time to get into today. But this is a major hallmark of not just Grower Project, but all of the William Chris Wine Company brand. And we talked about a big challenge of using these grape varieties is that they're not recognizable to consumers necessarily. And this is where we get into the social sustainable aspect. So part of social sustainability is making sure we have the resources to not just use sustainable grape varieties and plant them because they can succeed, but also we can educate customers about what they're drinking. Why would you choose to drink a Sangiovese Petite Syrah blend? Because, we're here, you guys have decided to commit to some education, and I have the time to give to you to explain what's important about it. That extra step is something that not just sustains us as a company, but also sustains the Texas wine industry, because we're not the only people working with Sangiovese and Petite Syrah and Tempranillo and Mourvedre and these grapes that they take time for consumers to get to know and fully understand. In addition to educating you guys, we're also dedicating time to educate our staff and create a meaningful experience, hopefully, when you come into the winery. So this takes it from just pouring wine and talking about it as an alcoholic product, but talking about this wine as food. This wine sustains not just your palate and your need to drink alcohol, it also sustains your soul and has meaning to it. That encaptures social sustainability to a T. And in addition, products like this sustain the growers that we work with, because we don't just want to purchase their grapes. We want to support them financially so they can grow more grapes and have success and continue on, plant grape varieties that are going to thrive long-term, but also have the resources that they need to continue working with the grapes that they have a passion for planting. If y'all are familiar with the brand Skeleton Key is the sister brand of William Chris Vineyards, started in 2015. The entire purpose of that brand was to provide health insurance to the employees that work at William Chris Wine Company now, which is 139 families, I think. I have health insurance because of Skeleton Key. This is something that not all companies are able to offer, especially wineries, many wineries, which don't operate for a profit. They operate for passion. So being able to offer that, in addition, have Christmas parties or other holiday parties or appreciation dinners. All of these are ways that, I am sustained as an employee and the people that I work with as well. So this is social sustainability. It's a huge aspect to not forget. We talk about environmental sustainability and water conservation, which, John, you're right, is widely practiced across Texas, but there are additional aspects to it. All right, I have a couple questions. We're going to finish off with economic sustainability, but I'm going to read through a couple of these comments first. Oh, Lane, thank you. Tornalock. I'm sorry, I say Tornaloke, which was wrong of me. Lane, the vineyard on a hill that we work with that first comes to mind is Del Valley, which is way out west. way out west past the Panhandle. It's surrounded by some of the highest mountain ranges in Texas, and their vineyard goes up 3,600 to 5,000 feet, maybe above that. But they use that flood irrigation. They dig trenches in order to capture water in that area. So, John, what grapes are not sustainable in Texas? So we work currently with, I think the last number I heard was 79 grape varieties in Texas. They are both white and red. Some of them are European grape varieties, and some of them are hybrid grape varieties like Blanc de Bois and Black Spanish that were created to thrive in environments like we're in. The most sustainable grape varieties in Texas may be those hybrid grape varieties because they were created to withstand some of the tough conditions that we're in. The least sustainable grape varieties that grow in Texas are grape varieties that love and thrive in a cool climate. A great example of this, and it doesn't mean that this variety can't be planted in Texas. It's just that it takes a really specific place in Texas to thrive, is Pinot Noir. And there are Texan wineries working with Pinot Noir and making really good Pinot Noir, some of which comes from Oregon, some of which comes from California, and some of which comes from Texas. But Pinot Noir is a great variety that is early budding, which means it buds early in the season when the frost is. Frost is a concern across Texas, and so this is a huge risk that makes the grape less sustainable than something like Sangiovese that doesn't bud so early. In addition, Pinot Noir likes a cool climate. It can grow in warm climates, but those really poppy, fresh fruit flavors that Pinot Noir is known for can be lost. And it's not just whether it's sustainable in ground, it's also whether people enjoy drinking it. And something that we haven't talked about just yet is that the goal of sustainability is a quality product that can be sustained on the market. If you are not being thoughtful about your product and it doesn't taste good, it is not sustainable. So the goal with all of these is a quality product that will not just be able to exist and do well in the market, but also support it and further it and cause for people not to just drink the wine and enjoy it, but drink the wine and lean in and want to know more. That is what sustains an economy and supports a product in terms of its entire lifetime. It's a really good question. Sorry, a couple of really good questions. Lane is a grower, and Pierce's disease is something that is, I talked about Pierce's disease a couple of weeks ago, and someone was really surprised that we still talk about it. Pierce's disease is a disease that thrives in Texas. It reaches as far as California, certainly. It's a bigger risk closer to the Gulf Coast, but not many grape varieties can handle it. Planting on the right rootstock is important, but also using grape varieties close to the coast, like Blanc de Bois, that was created to be Pierce's disease resistant, is important. It is extremely sad when a vineyard is pulled up because of Pierce's disease, and we've definitely seen that at William Chris, and it only lets us learn more. Mona, you're totally right. Sustainability is about using wisdom and experience to define what you do. And to learn from the mistakes you make. Sustainability is not all making the right choices. It's about learning from what you've done to make better choices in the future. That is sustaining yourself, getting yourself more educated, and understanding at a deeper level. John, such good questions today. John's question is, what is the impact of the new consultant, Jean Hofliger? Oh, I think I say that wrong. I learned the pronunciation. Sorry, Jean H, I'll say for now, on sustainability and winemaking. First of all, the partnership with Jean is a sustainable action. It's including a consultant who has a view of the wider wine world in order to support and understand deeper what we do. He is allowing us to think deeper about what we do. He's also educating us on different practices in order to accomplish what our goals are. And in turn, he gets to work with a brand that he is a fan of and learn from what we're doing, because Jean has largely, he hasn't worked with Texas necessarily before. And in this way, he's supporting the Texas wine industry and also learning a new skill, which is really cool. Did all of this influence William Chris making the Wine Spectator Top 100 Winery list at 56? I don't know if his involvement caused that. The wines that Jean has been consulting on are really just starting to be released. But I think sustainability is a part of why we may have made that list. That is for other people to decide. But I think the way that we practice wine and try to be thoughtful about it is something that is necessary of a winery that's being recognized on a list like that. And I think taste has something to do with that as well. But wine is not just taste. And I think all of you guys and me, I'm here because I understand that wine is not just taste. It is the full experience, and how we're working together and learning from each other, what we're learning from the wine, how we respond to it. Thanks again for very supportive comments. Have I chose my sweater for Saturday? Am I in on something? Am I not in on something that I should be in on? Who's going to the Uplift release? Anybody? Lane, Pinot Gris, I think doesn't like Texas. Yeah, I've heard some success stories of Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio in Texas, and some not so successful stories. And that may be beyond what I know about the relationship between Pinot Gris and Texas, but I have heard that similarly as well. Mona, does Pierce's disease always exist? Yes, there's no cure for Pierce's disease. There is only, if a vine is attacked with Pierce's disease, it is pulled up. And the way that it's carried is by vectors such as sharpshooters. They're like little mosquitoes that carry Pierce's disease within them. They spread it by sticking their little noses, or whatever they're called, into the grapevine. They release something that plugs the water that travels through. This is a really in-depth explanation, but the water that travels through the grapevine is plugged so that the sharpshooter can suck out the nutrients that it's trying to get. But ultimately, it causes the grape not to be able to transport water from the root system up into the leaves and the grapes. So yes, Pierce's disease is something that always exists. There's no cure for it. All you can do when that happens is pull up the grapevine and start again. Unfortunately, it kills the entire grapevine. So having grape varieties that are resistant to that is super important. And this is, the texture of the trunk that the sharpshooter would be attacking. This is any sort of natural resistance that the grape variety puts out to make sharpshooters choose another type of grapevine instead. Lane, good question. Are there more research companies here in Texas versus most coming from UC Davis? UC Davis is a wonderful center for education and research, especially in the field of wine. Another great one is Texas A&M. Texas A&M and Texas Tech both have wonderful programs for enology and viticulture. They're even creating new certification courses and just general experiences for agriculture, not just wine, but agriculture. They're supporting that entire industry. And I'm such a fan of the Texas AgriLife Extension Program, which is in Fredericksburg and probably many other places. But the research they're doing to allow agriculture, not just grapes in Texas, is incredible. They're learning how to plant raspberries that can grow successfully in the climate of Texas, but they're also creating new grape varieties that are have heavy influence from European grape varieties like Sangiovese and Petit Syrah, but also have resistance to many of the challenges of growing grapes in Texas. And there's many more beyond that. The education about Texas wine is huge right now. I get so excited about it. And if you have more questions about where to get access to programs that are really, really benefiting the industry of wine in the form of research, shoot me an email and let me know that you have interest, because I can help you connect to whatever resources I have found in my time here. Texas raspberries, that's the future. Kirsten, the Uplift release is this Saturday. So Uplift is not yet open. If you have questions about the Uplift brand, please shoot me an email. Let me know. And if Francisco is on, I'm sure he'd love to talk to you guys as well. But if you have interest in the Uplift brand, Uplift Vineyard is in Burnett County. It is a brand that will use only the top 10% of grapes from Uplift Vineyard. So it is the finest of wine. It's absolutely delicious, gorgeous wine. All right. Thanks, guys. Okay, let's finish. Gone way over. As usual, my apologies if I'm taking anyone's time, but I want to finish on economic sustainability. And this is a challenging part of the conversation for me, because it is about making sure that you have the money to do what you need to do. And this is often demonized and seen as a bad thing. However, it is economic sustainability beyond yourself. It is sustaining the economy that is the Texas wine industry. The number that I know is that the Texas wine industry is a $1.8 billion industry and growing. The ability to grow Texas wine and support growers starts with being financially responsible. This means not just having a brand that supports health insurance, but also making sure that you are able to consistently support the growers that you work with year to year. Imagine Altaloma Vineyard, 10 acres of wonderful vines. They're starting to plant more. Imagine if we were irresponsible as a company and we weren't able to sustain them every year. We had to break contracts. Maybe last minute, they weren't able to find someone to buy their fruit. It is so important that the people that we support get continued support from us, because that's the only way for growers to succeed in Texas, is to have access to the market. And a big part of this was the labeling laws that just passed, requiring that if you have a vineyard, a county, or an AVA, such as the Texas Hill Country or Texas High Plains, on a label, you're using 100% Texas grapes. This is challenging because if you're using 100% Texas grapes, you are supporting growers in Texas, which is a wonderful thing. You're finding access for these often small family growers on small plots of land to get their grapes purchased and onto the larger market. But the threat of that is that there may not be enough grapes to go around. So this labeling legislation passing means that we'll be investing more money and time in planting more grapes in order for everyone who has a winery here who wants to be making wine and continue making wine, making sure that they have access to enough grapes to make the wine that they need to in order to be sustained. Ultimately, long term, this is a benefit to the state of Texas. Using 100% Texas grapes means that we can have a consistent style, that we're supporting our own economy instead of somebody else's. We're creating a holistic approach to the entire state of Texas, from grower to bottle. But the only way to do that is to be able to support each other financially. This also means that we can support important charities in the area. We can support people who are trying to provide more education. William Chris supports places like the Texas AgriLife Extension Program. We also have recently donated money to the new medical service that is providing vans out into the Hill Country, which is access to emergency health care that this area doesn't have. I mean, in the middle of nowhere, like in Burnett County, having access to stuff like that is really important. And in this way, we're not able to just support our own winery and the people who work with or for us, but we're able to support the research and development of the industry that we're working in, and also support the local area. So all of this is part of sustainability. And John, that's the answer to your question. The goal of sustainability is a huge one, and it's taken us a long time to get to where we are. And it's about constantly being more thoughtful. We talked about a lot of overarching ideas today, but sustainable practices can happen in smaller ways as well. Like we recently switched to curbside recyclable packaging. The entire packaging that we use for Grower Project, but also all other brands, through Wine Cub, who also services other wine brands in Texas as well. They've switched to curbside recyclable packaging, entirely recyclable. It's 90% paper product, which means that it can be broken down and doesn't go into landfills where it can't do anything else. Switching to corks that reduce flaws within the wine. Cork taint is something that affects, I think it's 1 in 10 wines, or at least it used to be. If you have less flawed wine, it means that you're wasting less wine. That's a sustainable practice. Things like, the last one I wanted to mention is switching to lighter bottles. So wine bottles can be really heavy. Transporting a heavy wine bottle costs more in natural resources and gas than shipping a lighter wine bottle. So if you pick up a William Chris Wine Company Grower Project wine and notice that the bottles are light, this is a choice that we made intentionally in order to help preserve the environment and provide economic sustainability as well. So with all that being said, I'm going to release y'all for the evening. I'm sorry that this was the longest discussion we had, and I'm so happy that y'all are so interested in it and so many people have stayed on for so long. If you have questions, you are always welcome to reach out to me at education@williamchriswines.com or kelseykr@williamchriswines.com. You can watch previous episodes. We have 2 more coming up. Next week, we're going to talk about tasting terroir with the William Chris Vineyards Altaloma Syrah from the year 2019. So we're going to talk about the soil that these are growing in, the grape variety Syrah, the climate of Texas, and ultimately how that affects what you taste in the final wine. We're going to just bridge that connection. And then the last week of December, we're going to talk about this 2019 Petite Syrah from Lost Straw Winery from Verasian Hills Vineyard, which is in the Texas Hill Country. And we're going to talk about how a wine becomes a wine from beginning to the very end. We're going to try and capture the entire thing. So if you haven't purchased your pack, it is still live. If you want another one, go get it. This wine, the Sangiovese, is on our website. You can get it by the caseful if you must have more of it. It's the 2020 Sangiovese from Grower Project. And with that, I will say goodnight to you all and cheers. Thank you so much for celebrating sustainability in Texas with me and being with me every week. Bye, guys.